So the third C, and that's all about what I've categorized as categories. I've put it all the different categories of food into one section. And these are the considerations that I have now got on some of the insights and some of the realizations that I've had through this process. And the first is like the four main categories of food. And there's clearly processed foods. When you go to any supermarket, most stuff has been processed in some way to make it easier, quicker for us to consume, to make it more tasty, to make it more addictive. So a lot of the foods that we're offered have actually been processed or doctored in some way, which is not optimal. You know, it's got additives, it's got chemicals, it's got preservatives. So processed foods is one category to consider. How much do you have? And could you be looking to reduce the amount of processed foods and increase some of these other food categories I'm going to go into now? The second is cooked, and the third is raw, and the fourth is living foods. Now before cancer, BC, I didn't even know living foods existed. It's anything that's living. So the only thing that you can go to a supermarket, the one where I live, and get is cress. And I used to remember having cress and egg sandwiches as one of my staple sort of sandwiches that I used to quite enjoy. So that a living food is anything that's still living when as you're eating it. So what I'm going to introduce you to through this program is all the living foods that I eat. So they're the main four categories: processed foods, cooked foods, raw foods, and living foods. And what was a handy tip is say, how much processed food do I eat as a percentage? How much cooked food do I eat? How much raw food do I eat? And how much living food? Now, for me now, I eat a 50 to 60% living food diet. And I eat about a 20% raw food diet. And I eat about a 20% cooked food diet. Whereas before, I used to eat 90% cooked and 10% raw. And there was probably quite a bit of processed foods thrown in there as well. So that's just a complete switch from where I was, and I considered myself to be quite clean and quite healthy. And now I'm eating this high living plant food based diet. So that's the first consideration in the section that we've called categories. So the second part of the categories section is to do with what I've called building blocks. And what are the building blocks that keep us alive? And there's lots of building blocks, and most gyms that you go to will be focusing in on, if you go for personal training, is what they call the macros. And the macros is the blend of fats, proteins and carbohydrates that you'll eat. And a lot of people in the sort of mainline fitness industry are looking at protein focused diet, lower carbs and sort of moderate fats. And that's what all of our attentions are being brought to. In the UK, we ate a carb focused, carb heavy diet. And so it's just an interesting consideration as to how much fats, proteins and carbs that you have. And the second is, so you've got your macronutrients, you've got your micronutrients, we've got our phytonutrients, we've got enzymes, we've got bacteria, and the bacteria also need feeding. We've got vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids. So these are all important considerations when we're looking at creating a healthy lifestyle, a healthy balanced diet that's giving us the building blocks to allow our body to do what miracles it does, which is keeping us alive. So the third part of categories that I'm just throwing out here for consideration for yourself is all about what I've called labels, or our identity. And this is a funny one for me because I was switching to a vegan lifestyle, but could I see myself as a vegan? Now, my perspective or my view of what vegans look like, or the vegan community and the raw food community, I was like, I'm not sure that that's me, you know? So it's for me, that's just a funny, because I found it really hard to sort of come out that I'm vegan, because it was like, oh, you're never going to be healthy and people judging you. But here I am 2 years later, and I've adopted a vegan lifestyle, and I find it a lot. It's simple, it's easy to follow, and hopefully with this program you'll see that that's true. Then you've got the other type of identity, which is a vegetarian. You've got paleo, you've got ketogenic, you've got a fruitarian option, and my favorite by far is to become an intuitarian. Because what's most important is that we do what's right for ourselves, and what's right for one isn't necessarily right for another. So through this is like taking responsibility for ourselves and going inside and looking for the intuitive answers that we've all got within us. And somebody mentioned being an intuitarian, which I found extremely useful and extremely beneficial, and probably the identity that I can most relate to than any of the other ones. So the fourth consideration when it comes to categories is, what are the most nutritious foods that is available to us? And what I've learned is that the most nutritious foods on this planet is the plants, especially in the living or raw form, and as close to the source as possible, because we're going to get the most amount of energetic life force in our bodies, and we're going to be getting food, if you've grown it in your own house, that's living, it's got 0 air miles. It just, to me, makes sense. It's like the nonsensical common sense. It makes sense to eat this kind of food and eat it in abundance. So the most natural lifestyle, this is the most natural lifestyle. So when you start doing research on the oldest populations in the world, you'll notice that they eat a very wholesome, plant-based diet, and they might have small amounts of meat and dairy to supplement their plant-based lifestyle. So that's from the land. So the first and the most nutritious food is from the land. The next is from the ocean. So it's algae from the ocean. And there's lots of different types of algae. So, you know, nori, kelp. There's loads of different types of dulse is another big one that I have. And so just trying to find ways to integrate that. There's seaweed blends. I've got a 7 seaweed blend that I add into my different foods. So these are, you know, they're packed with minerals and some of the building blocks that we need to keep us going. The third is the freshwater algae, and there's only 3 that I know of personally, and that's blue-green algae. Now, and the second is chlorella, and the third is spirulina. So in this lifestyle, I have those foods, not every single day religiously, but with the blue-green algae, I'll take it as a supplement. I'll take it either as a liquid form or a powder if I can't get to it, and I'll take that 2 or 3 times a week. Then you've got the spirulina and chlorella, and the way I've condensed that down is I take those 2 in capsules. Some of the greens powders that are available on the market, they have spirulina and chlorella in them as well. Some of the greens capsules, they have spirulina and chlorella in them as well. So they're the most nutritious foods on the land, and if you start Googling the benefits of each of those, you'll start to realize that they're pretty cool things to include in your life too.